everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. Our 10 amazing speakers have been working on their presentations for a few months now, and they're so excited to share them with you. So I know that's why you're here, so let's get started.
Lessons learned from cleaning toilets. This summer, I served as Tawashi on work crew at a Young Life camp in Colorado, which basically meant that I spent a month cleaning. So I want y'all to imagine standing in a middle school boys' bathroom stall on a hot July summer day on your hands and knees cleaning every inch of the toilet. This was my life for a month, and it looked something like this. It doesn't help that 3 days into it, I slipped at the pool and broke my arm. So I was cleaning toilets for a month with a pink cast. Initially, I didn't think I was going to be able to learn much from cleaning toilets, but there are actually so many valuable lessons to be learned through it. I became to realize that instead of thinking it as cleaning a middle school boys' toilet, I could think about it as an act of service, something that is not new to me and something that I've always valued. I first started volunteering in middle school. My mom signed me up to volunteer for a week at ESP summer camp, and what I initially thought was going to be only a week has turned into 5 years. ESP exists to create transformative experiences for people with special needs and their families, changing communities for the better. I became involved with their after-school program, 360, which was really just being a friend to the participants. There's a million different stories I could tell and 1,000 different people I could talk about, but for the sake of time, I've chosen just to talk about a few. Meet Molly Kate. Molly Kate was my Big Hearts buddy, which is ESP's annual talent show, in 8th grade, and has turned into one of my best friends. Just like most of us, and I'm experiencing it right now, before Molly Kate got on stage, she got nervous. I remember her looking at me and saying, if I can just make one person's day better, then I've accomplished everything. That's the person Molly Kate is, a pure heart who loves people for who they are. As soon as Molly Kate walked on stage, she left all the anxiety she was feeling in the wings and let her true colors shine. Literally, she did sign language to the song True Colors that left everyone in tears. Meet Megan and Liz, two best friends who I got the opportunity to spend a week with at overnight camp. Part of my service at ESP is memories of other people and what they got to experience. At overnight camp, Megan and Liz went to the frat party, and it had been planned for cops to show up and bust the party. The next day, they couldn't stop laughing and talking about the crazy night they had before. I laughed along with them and started asking questions to hear more about their night. I started realizing that service takes a lot of slowing down and meeting people's needs for where they are. It takes a willingness to show up and learn from the people around me. I love how Gandhi says, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. I have been finding myself through service and also learning the values of service. First, service teaches empathy. It opens your perspective on things. You are able to experience someone else's life through their lens. At this school, because we don't have a special needs program, I'm not always able to experience that. So I love how ESP has given me this view. They can truly be celebrated. At one camp, during my first week on staff, I met a 4-year-old who struggled with emotional highs and lows, and I started to realize that transitions are not as easy for her as they are for other people. Once I realized that, I was able to empathize and find ways to make them easier, mostly by offering candy and playing music. Service not only connects you to other people, but also inspires you to continue to help them. After helping Molly Kate, of course I wanted to work with her on any other project she found herself doing. Service also allows you to make new friends, and it gives you a new community. ESP has definitely given me a new community of people outside of school who I've become friends with. We are all working toward the same thing and wanting the same thing. When you're working so hard and giving away yourself, it's so encouraging to look around and see other people doing the same thing. It creates a bond that other people don't have. At ESP camp, I could be covered in flour from bake-off wars, and I'd look around and see other people just as messy laughing along. Through service, I've met new best friends. We share a mutual want to give back, and even when we aren't at ESP, we are talking about these shared values. Service is also purpose-driven work. One of my favorite quotes is, "Not all of us can do big things, but we can all do small things with great love," by Mother Teresa. When I initially thought about service, I thought, oh, we're going to change the world. But that's not really it. It's about being someone's friend or leading a camp and giving out candy when the transitions are challenging. Just being there in the high moments of life and first. There's a lot of purpose in being a small part of someone else's daily life, celebrating someone else's achievements. So I'm lucky that I had all these lessons from ESP to apply to cleaning these toilets. And so I decided to think about it as an act of service. I discovered empathy within it. My friends, watching me and my paint cast struggled, offered to help because they knew it was taking me longer and that I was getting frustrated. They would even let me clean mirrors because it's easier to clean a mirror with one hand than it is to clean a toilet. And I felt the empathy of all these years and my mom having to clean up after my room and all the people in my life and even on this campus who clean up. The people behind the scenes are really doing a lot for us that can often go unseen. Cleaning toilets also gave me community. The really neat thing about work crew is that no one knows each other going into it. Everyone was from all over the country getting in the trenches together. We shared our common goals and values and bonded over our constant yellow spray cough. And while we only lived together for a month, it is friendships that'll last forever, and they're the first people I call when life is challenging. Something that our Chawashi boss always told us was to replace grumbling with gratitude. We had gratitude toward each other and gratitude towards the work that we were doing. These friendships are also deepened by our shared purpose-driven work. We weren't just cleaning toilets, welcoming buses full of campers each week and dressing up in silly costumes. We were creating a space for kids to know Jesus and experience camp, just as we had as campers before. We were removing distractions so that they could fully focus on the fun and joy of camp. We were in every space, making it all possible. Even when your work goes unseen, there is still so much purpose in it. And we could remind each other of this and stay motivated. I'll be returning to work here this summer, and maybe I'll be cleaning toilets or bussing tables or washing dishes, just hopefully not in a paint cast. But no matter what, I know that approaching it as an act of service makes me feel more motivated and exciting. Perhaps the best thing I learned is that you can find a lot of joy in the trenches. Thank you.
Hey guys. So last summer, the North Atlantic Ocean hit new record high temperatures that lasted over a few days. Now, this rise in temperatures can be attributed to many factors. You have rises in pollution, increases in deforestation, and most interestingly, a UN regulation on large ships. So in 2020, the UN put a regulation on cargo ships to help them burn cleaner fuel to help reduce their emissions. Now, this sounds like a great idea, right? You've got lower emissions, so that's less pollution and less problems. Well, not according to this temperature spike. So, cargo ships used to emit sulfur dioxide as one of their main pollutants. Now, these sulfur dioxide trails behind these ships would create these clouds known as ship trails. And these ship trails also acted as reflectors. So when these clouds went away and the temperature rose, it really makes us wonder, what did these clouds do to help cool the planet? So this brings me to my topic today, geoengineering. So what is geoengineering? Well, geoengineering is the intentional large-scale changing of the environment. So this is a very loose definition, since it can be argued that geoengineering can include both pollution and these new modern sciences meant to reduce the effects of climate change. So geoengineering has actually been around for a long time. In fact, back in 1891, the US started its first rainmaking experiments. This was after a general named Edward Powers in the Civil War noticed that rain frequently followed Civil War battles, leading him to the hypothesis that loud noises aggravated clouds enough to make it rain. So then a group of scientists led by Robert G. Dyrenforth went into the Texas desert to set off explosives and test that theory. And this isn't the only time that we've had tests like this. In fact, Napoleon was known to fire artillery into the clouds to also try to make it rain. So there are two main types of geoengineering. One, you have carbon dioxide removal, and two, you have solar radiation management. Carbon dioxide removal seeks to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and this can be achieved through many different methods. First, you have carbon burial, which is where you take carbon dioxide from that atmosphere and pump it underground into stable geological formations. Then you have ocean fertilization, which banks on algal growth as a means of taking carbon dioxide out of the environment. As these algae, they absorb this carbon dioxide through photosynthesis. Then you have biochar production, which is taking things like wheat and turning them into charcoal so that you are actually contributing to the cycle of carbon and just adding carbon dioxide that was recently in the environment rather than adding new carbon dioxide that has not been in the environment for a very long time from fossil fuels. And finally, you have direct air capture, which is using things like scrubbers or artificial trees around factories to take up carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Then the other type of geoengineering is solar radiation management. So solar radiation management aims to reflect a portion of sunlight back into space away from Earth to try to help cool the planet. Like with carbon dioxide removal, this can be achieved through many different ways. For one, you have marine cloud brightening, which is where scientists will shoot salt particles into these low-lying marine clouds to seed them or increase their reflectivity by making them brighter. Then people also want to do the opposite with higher clouds. So high altitude cirrus clouds they want to thin because these clouds help to trap escaping heat in Earth rather than letting it escape back into space. And then you have some space-based techniques which involve placing large mirrors into space that literally reflect the sun back away from Earth. And these seem very far-fetched to me. And finally, you have probably the most common, and it seems the most controversial, stratospheric aerosol injection. So this is where scientists will place particles like sulfates or calcium carbonates into the atmosphere, and the most common is sulfur dioxide. Yes, the same stuff that was coming out of the cargo ships. These particles act as reflected particles up in the atmosphere to also help send away sunlight. So while sulfur dioxide has bad impacts when it is in the lowest level of the atmosphere where we live, the thought is that if you can put it into the stratosphere higher up, it will be able to reflect more sunlight without as much negative impact. And this seems to have already been proven by nature. In 1991, Mount Pinatubo erupted, spewing 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. Over the next 2 years, this cooled the planet down by half a degree. And so there has been some testing done and some steps towards testing for this solar geoengineering. In 2019, Congress allotted $4 million to the NOAA for stratospheric research, part of which was for geoengineering. Then in 2021, the National Academy of Sciences published a report that called for the US to allocate $200 million more for research of geoengineering. And then finally, you make Sunsets, a new company launched in 2022, which sends weather balloons up into the atmosphere filled with helium and sulfur dioxide, and once it reaches a certain level, then it will burst and sending these sulfur dioxide particles out. Now, there has also been some major pushback. In 2021, a Harvard stratospheric aerosol injection test was abandoned in Arctic Sweden after an outcry from local indigenous people. And then in 2023, the Mexican government banned solar geoengineering testing after Make Sunset's first launch. So what's the big deal? Carbon dioxide removal versus solar radiation management. Well, carbon dioxide removal is generally agreed on by scientists as a necessary means for going into the future and combating the climate change crisis. Solar radiation management, on the other hand, not so much. Although it has many positive impacts, like it would lower pollution and it would like move the sunlight away from Earth and help to cool Earth. It would also have many unknown risks. Some of these include it doesn't address the root cause of climate change, which are the emissions. Then it can change rainfall patterns, and the aerosol particles could damage the ozone layer. And also, these particles have to be constantly maintained since they do not remain in the atmosphere for more than a year. Then, for climate change enthusiasts, they are really concerned because they think that polluters like the coal industry can use this solar geoengineering technology as an excuse to not continue on their path towards lowering emissions. But the biggest problem is there's only so much simulations and modeling can tell us. It isn't until we start trying geoengineering on a global scale that we will know its full impacts. So back to the UN regulation and the ship tracks. There are some pros to this. Now, we aren't breathing in as much sulfur dioxide. We can figure out a cleaner way to make clouds shield the ocean again. And it's a great research opportunity to figure out what the cooling effect of the clouds actually was. So, before I finish, I just want to say I'm in no way advocating for solar geoengineering. Yes, I do think it is a cool possibility, but I do know it comes with many risks. And I think the best way to handle its controversy is through understanding. So before I leave, I just want to leave you with one last question. Are we really discovering a groundbreaking technology, or are we just like Napoleon, shooting artillery into the clouds? And will we even know until it does or doesn't rain? Thank you.
So when you think about movies and TV shows with cars in them, what do you think of?
Fast and Furious.
Of course, yeah. Cars. Cars 2. Cars 3, yeah. So what do all these have in common? Well, yeah, other than cars. Drifting, yes. Drifting is all over pop culture, yet most people don't really know much about it. My name is Sam Talley, and this is Getting Sideways, an introduction to drifting. First, to understand how drifting works, you need to know what happens when a car takes a turn too fast. Most cars will understeer, meaning that their front wheels lose traction first. This makes the car keep going straight while the front wheels skid sideways. However, some cars oversteer, which means that their rear wheels lose traction first. Suddenly, the car wants to spin around backwards. This instability is similar to an inverted pendulum. I have an analogy here. So in this analogy, my hand is the front wheels, the broom is the rear of the car, and gravity is how much grip the rear tires have. Now, of course, you can't change gravity, but you can kind of change that in a car. So, yeah. It's hard to talk and balance at the same time. Yeah, so standing still with the broom is kind of like doing a burnout, but then walking around and trying to do tricks with it, that's essentially what drifting is. So similar to skateboarding, drifting skill is largely measured by the tricks you can do and how smoothly you do them. Some popular tricks include a 360, which is doing a full spin while maintaining momentum. There's a reverse entry, which is getting more than 90 degrees of angle in your drift, which you're essentially going backwards. And then there's a wall tap, which is, again, tapping a barrier with your bumper while you're drifting. And you get extra points if it knocks off your bumper. And then there's a tandem drift, which is two or more cars drifting as close together as they can. I could go on, but I only have 10 minutes, so I'm going to move on to the history of drifting. Drifting as a sport has only been around for about 30 years, but intentional oversteer has been around since the start of automobile racing. The origins of modern drifting are from rural Japan in the 1990s. An extremely talented touring car racer by the name of Keiichi Tsuchiya started winning races, and winning by a lot. He soon became bored and started sliding his car sideways around the corners. He quickly became popular, and soon teenagers all over Japan started trying to drift their parents' cars. Tsuchiya then helped produce an anime called Initial D, which, though it was publicly denied, was loosely based on his life. Initial D became very popular in the US, and drifting came with it. From this new motorsport came the Fast and Furious franchise, Cars, Baby Driver, and much more. Drifting today remains a niche hobby, but its influences are everywhere. Every driving video game, from Mario Kart to BeamNG Drive, features drifting. There's even something called Formula Drift. These are sponsored professionals driving purpose-built drift machines in expertly judged competitions. Drifting is everywhere, yet it is misunderstood and oversimplified by almost everyone. Getting sideways is an art form, and the world of motorsport would feel empty without it. Thank you for listening to my talk, and in the words of Doc Hudson, turn right to go left.
Hello, my name is Neela, and today I'll be talking to you about COVID's impact on hospitals and what doctors went through during this time. Of course, we all remember COVID-19 from the world going into a lockdown and all the news that we heard. We also saw how the virus was evolving throughout this time. With all of that, we all faced many challenges as a community as a whole. Technology became our best friend, and we continued classes through Zoom. For me personally, this was just an experience in and of itself since I was online for my first year of high school. And being bored out of my mind, I started to become more curious about what these doctors and what was the medical field going through. What were the doctors facing? What were they overcoming? What were the challenges they were going through with this worldwide pandemic? After my sophomore year, I was introduced into the Piedmont Volunteer Program. Here, I was able to see some of the first-hand protocols with safety after COVID-19. And this just made me more interested in what doctors were facing during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is just an interest that I've been working on for the past year. And here's what I learned through various interviews from 6 amazing doctors in the southeast area of the US, from our little city of Athens to Nashville, Tennessee. First, let's meet the people I interviewed. The 6 people I interviewed is Dr. Singh, Dr. John Bradford, Dr. Sneha Bhatt, Dr. Sunil Alexander, and Dr. Anna Alexander, and as well as Dr. Katie Pettit. These 6 doctors were able to teach me so many things about what they went through personally, as well as what the hospitals went through as a whole. And I have narrowed it down to 5 specific points that I think are the most important from what I've learned. The first important part that I learned was the economic impact in hospitals. As the pandemic started to continue and get worse, there were many problems with the hospitals as a whole, along with overworking staff and the sheer amount of equipment that was being used. there was also so many issues of getting those things paid for. Along with the equipment, there were vaccines, and there was a huge shortage of them as well. For example, Dr. Pettit talked about the sheer amount of money that was needed for staffing the vaccines. They had spent around $100,000 a month to staff the vaccination clinics as a whole. Along with that, there were many issues with the reduced number of staff in the hospitals. For example, nurses, who were basically super duper important during this time. And the hospitals were forced to hire different types of nurses to keep the nurse population in the hospital intact. For example, travel nurses, who were paid much, much more. And this was another reason for doctors in this time having their salaries being cut. For example, I learned that salaries were cut around 15% during this time. And this can be shown through a few statistics that I found online. The first one is that pandemic cost hospitals an estimated $24 billion to mitigate staffing shortages, as well as that more than 6,000 critical care nurses were retiring as of September of 2021. And along with that, the sheer amount of money that travel nurses were making versus regular nurses was just so much. As you can see up here, around $1,400 were made per week for regular permanent nurses, while for travel nurses, they made around $5,000 to $10,000 a week. The second thing I learned was the changes of the roles in the hospital. Due to many health centers being temporarily closed during the pandemic, there was lots of roles were slightly shifted during this time. Simple surgeries had been brought to that could be handled at an easy health center was done in the hospital emergency room, meaning that the capacity was also getting filled very quickly. This resulted to many people having to do other things along with their usual job. Dr. Sneha had touched on the impact in the trauma care that she faced with many struggles, as she states here. It affected my division specifically not only because by placing a strain on volume, it changed the normal standard operating procedure, increased my personal exposure in high-risk patients. Along with that, Dr. Bradford, for example, had to help the trauma care even though he was a specialized hand surgeon. In his general observation is stated here. As the clinics closed, hospitals became even more busy as a whole. This just shows the amount of workload that was put on the staff and doctors throughout this time. And I found a few statistics to go along with this. The first one is that around 2,000 health centers were temporarily closed as of May 8th, 2020. The third thing I learned from these amazing doctors was the education within the community. Of course, COVID caused so many questions and concerns for the community. Doctors had to deal with various types of people and answer these questions and concerns. And the attempt to understand these people was a challenge in and of itself. For example, Dr. Anna had mentioned the fact that she was faced with many of the after effects of COVID rather than the direct effects. She states here, it was more of a political challenge more than anything else. Along with that, the main struggle for many of the doctors in general was educating the community about COVID with the limited information that they had in itself. Another example is from Dr. Pettit, who faced with many phone calls that were related to COVID questions and concerns and dealing with angry patients as the medical director of the urgent care. She had stated, being in a rural and conservative area, educating people was truly hard, especially because there was only so much that I could do for the patients. Unfortunately, this was just the reality of the situation. There was lots of distrust of doctors and medicine, largely because COVID was a mystery. And leading to that is my fourth point, the mystery for hospitals. The general struggle of hospitals was due to the fact that COVID came out of nowhere and already came into the hospitals widespread, meaning that new facts were found and given left and right, making hospitals having to adapt to these situations very quickly. Dr. Singh had stated that the main 5 things that was necessary for a hospital to be able to overcome a pandemic like COVID was basically non-existent. This disease was evolving and those things were not available at all. This just shows that there is so many things that doctors were unable to fully do. They had not all the information available because there really wasn't that much information to just look back on. And so much information was being dropped really quickly that having to adapt and not knowing what to do with this information was a huge struggle. For Dr. Sunil Alexander, there were concerns with taking care of the newborn babies and post-pregnancy patients, and this just was a hole so they would not get sick. He had stated, overall, there was more of a mystery of how to help the patients than actual answers. And this just shows that there was no real way of having a successful solution to a treatment when there were so many unknown factors in the equation. The last and most life-changing effect is the trauma that the patients and doctors alike had faced. For patients, mothers during pregnancy were faced with such a hard time as they were going through a really happy moment in their lives, isolated in a, hospital room. And they also were faced with lots of stress due to, and got into a disease called the acute respiratory disease, which caused many problems for doctors. And here are a few statistics about nurse happiness and nurse stress levels. And as you can see, lots of the happiness lowered and the stress increased during this time. Along with patients, doctors were faced with the traumatic experiences as a whole related to the COVID pandemic. For example, Dr. Pettit had stated, the feeling of being appreciated for what we were doing was non-existent, in my opinion. And this was more related to the fact that being in a place where there were many repercussions of the community going against the many things doctors and staff had recommended was just something that could not be fixed in any way. As well as the issue that staffs were overworking due to the lack of people in the hospital. And additionally, this was just an issue working at a time where there was so many risks going to work as a whole. Dr. Sneha stated, the negative effects of the pandemic on the hospital employee morale is very hard to put into words, but it was very real. And overall, it shows how doctors and staff were just in a place where they must risk their lives because it was important to help their community. For me, personally, I learned what it was really like to be a doctor during a time like this, but along with that, I grew to appreciate these people so much more. I hope that you have learned something new, or better yet, gained a new appreciation for the doctors and the hospital staff out there. The most important thing that I want you all to take away from my presentation today is that doctors and hospital staff in general have risked their lives and their health to help their community, and the appreciation and respect we should have for them is extremely important. If there's anything we can do for them is the appreciation and being grateful to have these people in our life helping in that field. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Renee, and this is everything I didn't expect when traveling to South Africa. So, we know that traveling takes you out of your comfort zone, and my trip to South Africa took me out of my comfort zone in more ways than I could imagine. Last summer, me, 15 of my classmates, and 2 chaperones, Mr. Billmeyer and Mrs. Land, went with me to a trip to South Africa, and I'm happy to see that many of them are in the crowd today. And so I had a lot of expectations in mind when going on this trip. First, I expected to be uncomfortable the whole 12-hour flight to Johannesburg. Next, I expected to be scared of that flight because I'm afraid of heights. I expected to be uncomfortable sharing a room with someone because that was the first time. And I expected to be excited on my safari seeing all those amazing animals, especially a lion. But I could have never expected what happened next. When I was supposed to be in Johannesburg, I was on a different continent, and instead of 2 days of travel, it ended up being 5. So how did we get there? Our original plan. Step 1, from Atlanta, go to New Jersey. Step 2, from New Jersey, go to Johannesburg. And that sounds simple, And the first flight from Atlanta to New Jersey was simple, smooth sailing. We landed in New Jersey and found our terminal and waited to board the plane. And oh boy, did we wait. We waited and waited and waited some more. We were waiting to board our 8 p.m. flight, but 8 turned to 9, 9 turned to 10, and 10 turned into 11, and we had yet to board our plane. What was going on? I was thinking, let me on that plane already. See, what happened is around 11:50, we finally board our plane. I sit down and try my best to get comfortable because I expected this flight to be very uncomfortable. But I never expected what blasted on the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, your flight to Johannesburg has been canceled. What? Canceled? Why? Our flight was canceled because we had failed to take off before midnight, even though we boarded the plane at 11:50. So we get off the plane, tired and frustrated. What were we supposed to do now? How will we get to Johannesburg, and will I ever forgive United Airlines? No, I won't, but at least they gave us hotel and taxi vouchers. That night, our chaperones and Mr. Hovater, our travel coordinator, devised a plan, and they stayed up all night trying to figure out how would we get to Johannesburg. So, our new plan. First, we would go from New Jersey to JFK. From JFK, we would fly to Munich, Germany. From Munich, we would go to Frankfurt, and then from Frankfurt, we would go to Johannesburg. A bit more complicated, but doable. So we took our heavy suitcases from our hotels and got to the Penn train station. None of us had been there before, so we got lost. And when we found our train, our train then changed platforms, so with our heavy suitcases, we ran up and down stairs all across that train station, trying to make sure we didn't miss our train. There's a photo. When we finally got on, we sat there. It was a bumpy ride, but after many flights of staircases, many subway and train rides, we finally got to JFK. But the thing is, with JFK, we were on the wrong side. We needed to be on the international end, which was on the other side of town. We couldn't take the air shuttle because that was broken. We couldn't take the bus because there was 100 people waiting for the bus as well. So our last option was to take some Ubers. But there was a mathematical problem. There was 18 of us, but we only had 4 Ubers. So somehow, 5 of us squeezed in the back seat of a black Infiniti SUV. As you can see here, this is Sally next to Jonesy, and on Jonesy's lap is Luke. I taking a photo sitting on Amira's lap. It was a great ride to JFK. When we got there, we found our terminal and boarded the plane. We got to Munich, Germany, and we had 12 hours to spare from that flight to Frankfurt. And so we spent the day touring Munich. We got to see beautiful buildings, I ate some good food, and we saw this cathedral and walked in on our church service. It was great. After that, we went back to the airport and boarded our flight to Frankfurt. And we sat on the plane waiting for it to take off. And we waited. And we waited some more. After a couple of hours sitting on the plane, I was wondering, when will it take off? Then our flight attendant says, "Ladies and gentlemen, due to some technical difficulties, your flight has been delayed. If you are waiting for your connecting flight from Frankfurt to Johannesburg, you will miss that flight." What? How unlucky are we? 2 flights in a row? So we sat on that plane, very disappointed, very sad. And when we landed in Frankfurt, we had nothing else to do but explore the city. So we saw Frankfurt. We saw a dinosaur museum, and we took a bus tour around the city. And so, like before, after touring the city, we went back to the airport. We went to our terminal and waited to board the plane. And we waited. And we waited some more. And kept waiting, but we still weren't on the plane. And they hadn't started boarding yet. I started to get deja vu. And someone announces, "Ladies and gentlemen, your flight has been delayed till tomorrow morning." How unlucky are we? This cannot be happening again. Will we ever get to Johannesburg? I felt defeated, and this time tears started surfacing in my eyes, and I sat there and cried in the airport. I wanted to give up and go home right then and there, but I thought, you know what? I made it this far, I may as well keep going. And so, after 103 hours of travel, we finally made it to Johannesburg. But you know, this beforehand wasn't all that bad. It taught me, while being very unexpected and turbulent, it taught me a lot of things. First, it taught me to be flexible. Our situation and our plans were changing any minute, so I had to adapt quickly in order to ensure my safety, and this allowed me to go with the flow sometimes. And going with the flow allowed me to make the best out of everything. This was my first time in Europe, and I saw the positive side of it, you know, getting to see Munich and Frankfurt and lots of Germany. And I liked meeting new people and eating new food, and so even though it was quite disappointing, I had to see the bright side of it. And so we got to Johannesburg, and while we missed many of our days that we would spend there, we got a quick tour of the city and the South Africa capital, Pretoria. And so here is us in front of the soccer stadium, and then we also saw the Nelson Mandela statue. Next, we went on our safari. We saw these deer-like species. We saw zebras and elephants, rhinos, and hippos. Unfortunately, we did not see a lion. Next, we went to Cape Town. We stayed near this waterfront hotel, and it was beautiful every morning to see the boats. We saw this very colorful neighborhood and penguins. Who would think that penguins lived in Africa? But this next part that was unexpected is completely my fault. See, I didn't fully read the itinerary, and so when I woke up and they told me I was going on a zip line down a mountain, I was not very happy. And so I take this bus ride up this mountain. I'm bawling my eyes out, as you can see, and I'm scared. You know, it's freezing up there, it is pouring down rain, and I'm not very happy. And I look over the edge of the mountain, I can't even see the ground. I want to go home, and I want to turn around right then and there. But I realized I made it this far, I may as well keep going. So I get on the zip line. Our guide asked me, "Are you ready?" I give him a cry, and he pushes me anyway. I get pushed, and I'm flying in the air, and my tears just fly away, and most of my fear. And I realized that I had a lot of fun doing that, and while I was really scared, I was proud of myself for overcoming some of my fear. And so overall, while a lot of this trip was so unexpected, I learned to see the best out of every moment, no matter how dim. And I realized at the end of it that this trip was better than I could have ever imagined. I realized that it's the journey that matters, not the destination. Thank you.
to heal itself. All right. So first, why is it important to use our own DNA? I'm going to start with some philosophy. So the Theseus ship paradox asks if there's a design ship and it's made of wooden planks, and every year you replace some of the rotted wooden planks. After a while, after all the wood is replaced, is it still the same ship? Well, we can apply this to our own bodies. Although our cells constantly get replaced with new material, I would argue that we are the same people because our DNA has its own specific code. So we need to take advantage of that and use our own DNA. So today I will be talking about what a stem cell is, what is osteoarthritis, and how can we use stem cells for that? How we can use stem cells for care in leukemia and blood cancer. And then what are induced pluripotent stem cells and how we can make stem cells more versatile. And then lastly, the novel and future medicine of generating livers. So first, I'll explain what stem cells are and give a basic rundown. So stem cells, in essence, they're the wild card, the most versatile cell. And not only do they generate more stem cells, but they can differentiate into specific types of cells in your body. And they are always there to help regenerate damaged tissue. Now, I am not speaking about embryonic stem cells. That is of much controversy, and none of the embryonic cells or embryonic cell research is what I'm talking about or am I endorsing. Next, you have multiple types of stem cells in your body, each with the specific niche of types of tissues and types of cells it can turn into. Example, a skin stem cell. It can regenerate new hair as our hair grows and new skin cells. Now, we also have mesenchymal stem cells. They turn into tissue and cartilage, and they're found in your bone marrow and fat. And then we also have hematopoietic stem cells. And they turn into types of cells in your blood, like your red and white blood cells. And I'll explain what osteoarthritis is and the current therapies with stem cells to help heal that. So osteoarthritis, as you get older, your tissue and your cartilage in your joints, especially your knees, can degrade and wear down. The problem is, regularly, your stem cells would reach your damaged tissue by your bloodstream and help regenerate and heal it. But the problem is, your cartilage doesn't have much vascularity. Therefore, your stem cells, which would be the mesenchymal stem cells that regenerate cartilage, can't reach it. So that leaves your cartilage and osteoarthritis unhealed. Now, there's a solution to this with mesenchymal stem cell therapy. You have a high count of mesenchymal stem cells, especially in your bone marrow. So doctors using autologous therapy, using your own cells, your own DNA, will take some of that bone marrow fluid and they'll isolate about 5 million of those cells through a centrifuge. And then they can inject it into your joint with osteoarthritis. Now, this is very low intensity. It doesn't require surgery or a prosthetic, which is very intensive and can be harmful to the patient. Now, how do we know this works? Well, in 2023 in Brazil, there was a study done across the world in Japan, Canada, and most of Europe, not USA, because it is not approved by the FDA in USA, compiling about 35 different trials to study the results. The results were outstanding. 67% of the time, patients from themselves reported 2 times improvement in pain relief, being able to use their joints again and walk. About 70% of the time, the MRIs themselves showed decreases in inflammation, as this indicates that the cartilage wasn't damaged and the immune system wasn't responding. This shows that the therapy has been quite effective, using your own cells from your body and relocating them. Next, I will talk about leukemia and blood cancer and bone marrow transplants, which have been along for a while and are used in the United States. Leukemia is a blood disease. When the progenitor cells in your bone marrow, which produce your white blood cells that are important to your immune system, are deformed and cancerous, they at a rapid rate make deformed white blood cells, which decreases the ability for your immune system to fight infections and can lead to rapid degradation. Now, like before, doctors can use stem cells to help heal this. The problem is we don't use our own autologous stem cells, because our stem cells are currently filled with cancer, we use a donors, usually a relative. And once again, they're in the bone marrow. These hematopoietic stem cells, or HSCs, are taken from the bone marrow, isolated, and then injected into the bone of the patient. Now, 40% of this time, the immune system rejects the stem cells because, once again, it's not your own cells. It's not your own DNA. Your DNA is distinct to yourself, and sometimes your immune system will deflect and reject foreign DNA. So, adult-induced pluripotent stem cells. This is how we can make our stem cells more versatile. A problem with the mesenchymal stem cell therapy for osteoarthritis is once you get older, although your stem cells should replace at a rapid rate and keep their quantities, when you get older, some stem cells become inactive and they don't regenerate. This leaves especially the mesenchymal stem cells responsible for tissue and cartilage growth at a very low level, making it not an option for osteoarthritis therapy. These two doctors, Dr. Gurdon and Dr. Yamanaka, 2006, with their work on rats' stem cells, made different stem cells more versatile and an option for use. And in 2012, they won a Nobel Prize in physiology. What did they do? They took skin stem cells, which on your skin should only make skin and hair cells, and made them more versatile into the pluripotent state, which means that essentially they can become any type of stem cell and any type of cell. So hypothetically, you could make a skin stem cell be able to make a neuron, which is incredible. Now, when we apply this to the future of medicine, we hope to be able to make livers. And the problem with donating livers is 30% of the time it's rejected because it's not the patient's own liver. It has different DNA from a donor. So the immune system is not used to it. We want personalized care. In 2020, at Pittsburgh University, doctors used stem cells donated by a patient, skin stem cells especially, and were able to induce them to the pluripotent state, change them to mesenchymal stem cells, and able to produce a functioning liver. This is incredible. As you can see how complex the liver is, the doctors were able to produce a liver out of cells that were meant to produce skin. Now, this is phenomenal and unfathomable that we can produce such a complex organ. But right now, this cannot be used because the stem cells rapidly grow at a fast rate and are prone to causing tumors and can be a problem. Stem cell therapy is what we all want, personalized care. Not getting rid of our DNA and not using some metal or somebody else's DNA, but modifying our cells with our own DNA to help personalize care. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Andrew Jones. I'm here to talk about Sign of the Times. This is an album by the artist Prince, and it means a lot to me. I'd like to share it with you all today. First, I gotta change something. I like those colors better. So, this is me when I was about 3 years old, banging on my dad's drum set in the basement of my old house. Music has always been a really important part of my life. I may have been a little indoctrinated by my parents to really like music, but I'm okay with that because I really do enjoy music. And this album, this piece of art, has meant the most to me throughout my time, and I'm excited to share it with you all today. Before I actually move into some of the meat of the album, I'd like to give you a little bit of a preface. So, Prince had come out with 7 studio albums before this. These were his 3 most popular, 1999, Purple Rain, and Parade. They were all kind of unique in their way of delivering the music. 1999 was kind of this futuristic, heavy use of electronic, very forward-thinking album. Purple Rain, heavy guitars, his most popular album. A lot of people's favorite. I get it. It's really great. Parade is probably his most popular song, Kiss, off this album. It has a lot of high moments, but also uses his vocal performances to a spectacular level. And I think all of these are great works of art, but with Sign of the Times, he likes to combine all of these elements and then adds this new piece, which is this live instrumentation, and he delivers it so well in the music that he does. Again, before I move in, I'd like to talk about what a double album real quick is. A lot of people may know what that is, but younger people like myself may not, may not know what it is. So if you go to the record store, you buy yourself your album. It's going to have 2 sides on it, but a double album just means there's 4 discs, which means there's more music. And so what this does is it creates these like moments of pause for the listener, and it creates these moments of tension. It relieves that. It just serves all of this purpose to like intentionally stop the record, make you think about what you just listened to. And with Prince, everything is intentional, and this was done on purpose. Again, song ordering, with Prince, everything is done intentionally. You must not forget that. This guy is, in my opinion, a musical genius, and all of his work is done exquisitely. So if I'm going to use the example of the first 4 songs in the album, Sign of the Times, Play in the Sunshine, Housequake, and The Ballad of Dorothy Parker, to show you just a little snippet of what this song ordering would look like. These first 3 songs are about social commentary, what's happening in the world, what's wrong with society, how we can move back to how we were like when we were children, or funky dance beat, running away from the police, Housequake. And then those all kind of shift together, record scratches after Playing the Sunshine to move into this kind of ulterior motive that is Housequake. And then as that flows out, you get The Ballad of Dorothy Parker, which is this 2.5-minute long song about this fling he had with a waitress. It's not related to any of the social commentary themes, but it transitions the album into the next part. And it's my favorite song because of how beautiful, I don't even know how to describe it, it's just amazing. So, actually moving into the song topics and themes. There's 4 I'd like to cover. There's the social commentary, which I've touched on briefly. There is the theme of love. Prince really enjoys this theme. It's in a lot of his work, and it's a good topic to talk about, so he really goes into that. He puts these stories in just to kind of break up the narrative and relieve some moments of tension. And then at the end, he has these 3 kind of conclusive thoughts that kind of wrap up his summary of the album. So with the social commentary, first, this is intentionally placed at the beginning, just so everyone can know this is what Prince's views are on this. There's some quotes behind me from some of the songs talking about it, and these are like, what's wrong with society? It's a sign of the times that the way we do things leads to these outcomes. Why do we do this? Play in the Sunshine is like, as we get older, we get more toxic, we don't like each other as much, we should go back to being like how we were with kids to escape that reality. And then all of a sudden, record scratch, high-pitched voice, drums kick in, shut up already, damn. He goes real heavy on the beat, it's run away from the police, we gotta get out of this house, Housequake. And I think this is just a perfect example of just 3 different records, or 3 different songs showing complete sides of view of how to view the world around you. Talking about love, there's a lot to talk about here. So I've created this little graph to hopefully like make it make a little bit more sense. There's 2 major topics like real love and toxic love. Real can be kind of separated even further into this passionate one-night stand type of thing, or this kind of true love, which is like, I want to get married to you. And then there's also this aspect of toxic love that is a very real and apparent part of relationships, and he does a great job of diving into this. This quote is from a song called Strange Relationship. I would fit it under the toxic theme. And what I think is probably the most beautiful thing about this song is that it's a track that feels good to listen to. It's like you want to roll down the windows in your car and stick your head out and like get your hair, because it feels like something you want to sing along to. But then you listen to the lyrics of it a little bit, and it's like, wait, this is a really messed up story. These people probably shouldn't be together. And the way he's able to combine those two feelings at the same time is just remarkable as a listener. This is from Forever in My Life. This is just about wanting to get married to this person. It's a really beautiful story. He uses kind of vocals, his overlapped vocals, to kind of present this to the audience, and they kind of continues over this low guitar pattern. And it just kind of shows that this is a very genuine approach to love, and I think that's a beautiful aspect as well. So these stories, there's a lot of these intense moments, as you saw in those graphs. I had song on that graph. There's a bunch of songs on there about love in this middle section of the album. And that can be a lot to take in at some points. So these stories, these 3 songs, relieve that tension. I mentioned the Ballad of Dorothy Parker. There's also 2 other songs, Starfish and Coffee and I Could Never Take the Place of Your Man, which just take away from that moment, tell a short story, I Could Never Take the Place of Your Man. Again, something that you want to dance to, that you want to just play, and then you really listen to the lyrics, and you're like, he's just leaving this girl on the dance floor with an abusive partner, and maybe this isn't good. But it's still a great song overall, some good playing on it, and it just kind of shows the greater side of music. I really appreciate all of these songs. But then finally, towards the end, this is a really long album. It's about an hour and 15 minutes. You get to this last section, these last 3 songs. I think these are probably the 3 most important songs on the album. They span about 20 minutes, these 3 songs alone, and these are these songs. The Cross, It's Gonna Be a Beautiful Night, and Adore. And basically, Prince comes to 3 conclusions that he wants to share with the audience at this point. That he loves God, that he loves making music, and that he loves you. And he does this in a different way for each of these songs. The Cross is kind of, it starts out this low spoken word melody with an acoustic guitar, which you rarely see him play, followed by this heavy drumming and electric guitar aspects towards the later part of the track that really makes you really shows his passion for God. It's Gonna Be a Beautiful Night is a live song, which basically means it was recorded in front of a live audience, and he's up there literally composing and directing on the stage, and you get a glimpse into his mind of what he thinks makes his art so beautiful, and I'm just baffled every time I listen to it to think, wow, how does he know when to do that to make it sound so good? Stop it right there. I know he practiced a lot to make it sound like that. And then Adore is this about 5.5, 6-minute ballad. It kind of combines this whole thing that I've been talking about. There's a lot of live instrumentation, saxophones, horns coming in the back, a bunch of overlaying vocals continuously getting higher pitched throughout the entire song to kind of tell you that he adores you, that he loves you. And it's a perfect send-off to the album, telling you really how much he cares about you. So how does this make you feel? It makes me feel refreshed, happy. I really enjoy listening to this album. Again, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I think it's the greatest piece of art ever created. Different topic, but it's something that I can listen to at any time and feel a number of emotions in any sort of way, and I'm so glad I listen to it every time I do. And you may think, if you listen to it yourself, which I hope you all do, you may not think that was the greatest thing I've ever listened to, but I do hope that everyone does take a chance to listen to it, because it means so much to me, and if it even means just a little bit of what it means to me, to any one of you in the audience, that would make my life a lot better. So I'd like to end off on a quote by the man himself. To create something from nothing is one of the greatest feelings, and I'd wish it upon everybody. It's heaven. I feel like he really made that quote come to life in this album. I think it's the perfect piece of art, and it can be enjoyed in so many ways, and I hope you all enjoy it as much as I have. Thank you.
Hello. What's up, ACAD Nation? How's it going? Let me get this in my pocket. Don't be weird, Walter. Use it quicker? Okay. All right. So sorry if this stool's been a little bit distracting. I know it's beautiful. So this sturdy fella, I actually built it with my father, believe it or not. Oh my God, these lights are bright. And what's the most interesting thing about this stool is actually a lot of this wood on the top here. I don't know if you can check out the screen. Oh, is it the good side, Dad? All right. A lot of the wood is from our old farmhouse, which is 200 years old, and my family actually won it in a land lottery. And I grew up on this farm, and I spent a lot of my time with my dad in his shop and just like messing around, building stuff with his scrap wood. I was always really curious about building and fixing stuff, and my dad sort of showed me the ropes with that. And I even found recently a tutorial on how to build a kite and a glider, it looks like. So if you needed to build out of those, I guess I could send you that. But it just shows like my early curiosity in that field. And also around the house, if my mom ever had any issues with like the vacuum cleaner or anything, I would be the guy at the house to take it apart and sort of see what the issue was. Probably not be able to put it back together, but I like to learn about that type of thing. And also, I got into like inventing sort of stuff, and a good example I can remember is I rigged up this like pulley system in my room, pretty weird. I was trying to like figure out a way to turn my lights off from across the room in my bed, and so that was kind of cool, I guess. It doesn't come too much of a surprise that I started a boat refurbishment business with a buddy of mine about a year and a half ago, and this is largely because of my passion for fishing and building. And the process sort of looked like, as we started out, we bought like small boats, small John boats that with money that we had saved up over the summer. And we sort of made them ideal for fishing, so we added like a decking system after we stripped the boat down, sanded it, and repainted it. And as we progressed, we worked on several boats throughout the year and a half of work. And we got to much bigger boats, as you can see here. This is a whole 4 feet longer and includes a couple motors and a much more complex build. And as we progressed, our products became much more quality as we sort of refined our skill set in this field. So this is sort of what the process looked like. It had a lot to do with a lot of planning and measuring, and we learned a lot to do with structural support in the decking systems, which included a lot of storage. Pretty cool. So throughout my time last spring researching craftsmanship in general, I came across all the values of craftsmanship which I actually noticed a lot in my boat business. And the first overarching value is craftsmen always value quality of work over quantity. And in our modern society, this goes largely overlooked as consumerism, a system based on consumerism, largely favors quantity over quality in hopes of making quick money. And this production of a lot of poor quality goods actually leads to a lot of waste in the long term. And a system based on craftsmanship would be much more beneficial with a lot less waste, if you care about that. And what leads into the quality of product is a craftsman's dedication and patience in their work. So in terms of dedication, craftsmen will work on their specific field for weeks, months, and even years before they like master it to the ability to efficiently produce the most high quality products in their area. And I noticed this big time with the boats. We, as we worked, we got faster and we were producing better, more quality boats. And so I definitely noticed that. And in terms of patience, I think of my dad's work. So he's sort of a mixed media artist, and I've looked up to him and his work because he exhibits a lot of these values in his work. And I've never seen him rush a painting or even just a project around the house. And this allows him to come out with really quality products. And finally, the factor of craftsmanship that actually makes a craftsman's product unique and can almost be seen as an art form is their human input. So I spoke a good bit with a unique wood turner who takes their profession very seriously, their craft. And this is Matt Atola. He's very interesting. He sources wood from all over, and he has a unique eye for a specific type of wood with unique growths. And as you can see here, the grain is quite unique, and it's kind of cool to look at. And his actual process he described to me was quite unique, and he had obviously mastered it, and with every composition of wood, he would have a different process. So he actually sort of refined his skill set in there, and it was really interesting to get knowledge on that. And Matt actually, his profession is quite beneficial as he sources wood from across the country, but he does this in communication with tree removal companies. So he finds good use in wood that would inevitably become waste, trees that are being removed, and he makes these into really cool art. And really similarly, my father, Aaron Heckenberg, he sources a lot of his wood from discarded wood, like old renovated houses, a lot from an old dairy barn on our farm, and he finds good use of this, and he incorporates it into his artwork in the background. You can see in the frame, and his style of work is actually really unique. He has mastered a process of engraving over a series of book pages on a background of wood, and he also incorporates like painting with that. And this is actually my brother with his chicken, and my sister with her horse growing up. And these are people we knew from our hometown in Monticello. And you can also see that he incorporates some images in the pages in the background that have a relevance to the piece. That's pretty cool. And this is hanging up in the preschool, I believe. It's me. And what I always respected a lot about my father is his pride in his profession, and I think this is largely because he personifies the values of craftsmanship that I came upon: dedication, patience, and quality of work. And I've always strived to become the craftsman that he is, and I hope to one day be half the craftsman that he is. And thanks for helping the stool, Dad.
I need you all to help me out with something here. I need you to close your eyes and imagine something for me. You're a small Indian boy. I know it's gonna be hard. If you're not small, you're not Indian and you're not a boy, but just work with me. You're a small Indian boy, and it's the crack of dawn. You have just woken up, and you are in your small, run-down slum in the middle of nowhere, India. You wake up, you put on your one ratty shoe, and you begin your 10-mile trek to school. Through this trek, you fight a lion. You walk through the jungle, and you drag yourself into quicksand just to get to your old, run-down slum of a school, also in the middle of nowhere, India. Now open your eyes for me, folks. Open your eyes for me. This is the story that my father used to tell me every single day for the first 12 years of my life. And for the first 11 and a half years, I sadly believed him. I believed that he had gone through all of these hardships and that he had done all these terrible things, like all these terrible things had happened to him. But then I realized that my father was incorrect. So actually, believe it or not, this is not a picture of my dad. We don't actually even know who that is. But that's the photo he used to show me. So let's just get that out of here. My dad actually grew up in a place called Bihar. It is in northeastern India, and he grew up in this beautiful 3-story house. His dad was, contrary to popular belief, not a farmer. He was a country-renowned mathematician. And my dad was the youngest of 5 children, which means that he liked to make up a lot of stories just to get attention, which honestly makes sense as the youngest child in my family too, so I get it. But the first lesson my dad ever taught me was that on a technical level, his life would always and will always be harder than mine. Now, I get it. He grew up in India after all. I'm here with my sister, with my mom, with my dad in America, and so it all makes sense. Now you guys might be wondering, how are you able to talk about your dad like this in front of a whole slew of people? And let me explain it. So let me give you a little bit of a backstory. About 10 years, 12 years back, my dad and I were sitting around a dinner table, and he started poking fun at me. Now, as a 5 to 6-year-old, I was like, what are you doing? Why are you making fun of me? And he would make fun of me and he'd tease me, and I'd sit there and I'd cry and say, Dad, stop making fun of me. I don't want to be made fun of. And he would just poke fun at me and poke fun at me. And so until I was 9, 10, 14, 15, doesn't matter, I would cry at the dinner table because I didn't like being made fun of. Until finally, I got my bearings and I started teasing my dad back. So obviously, this is going to be a little bit of my comeback story at you. So sorry for that. So my dad used to sit us down around the dinner table as a whole, and he would give us these long, organized, bulleted life lessons. He does this every single day at the dinner table. And so these lessons range from very easy things, like how to invest in the stock market, so money, how to change your oil or your tire in your car, which obviously makes sense, and how to kill a cobra. You know, regular dad-daughter conversation stuff obviously makes sense. But all jokes aside, my dad has taught me a lot of valuable lessons. So the second lesson my dad has taught me is that you can only blame yourself for the problems that occurred. And he's right. When my dad told me this lesson about 9 years back, I thought, God, Dad, I didn't know you were that smart. That's a really good life lesson. And I thought, yeah, that's incredible. And so he told me this life lesson because I often used to blame people for my problems. And he was right, I shouldn't do that. But then a couple years later, I came to the realization, Dad, I don't think you actually followed this rule. So let me give you guys an example. My dad loves sweets. We call them mithai in Hindi. So basically there's Indian sweets, and my mom gets boxes and boxes in our house all the time. So this is important, I promise you. So every time my dad gains a single pound of weight, he always does this. He doesn't blame himself like he tells everybody that he's going to do. He looks at my mom. And he looks at my mom and says, your delicious food is the reason this is happening. And my mom turns around and looks at him and says, you know, you teach our daughters that you can only blame yourself when you're clearly blaming me for all of these problems of yours. But as you can see, by the end of each night, this is what the table looks like. So we kind of run out of these sweet boxes really, really fast. And so I think it's hilarious because my dad's a little bit of a hypocrite when it comes to this life lesson. The third life lesson that my dad has taught me is that you must see all the sides of the story. Now my best friend over here is smiling like crazy because she knows this is what I say to her every single time she's in an argument with anybody. And it's true. I always tell everybody, hey, you can't make an opinion until you've seen the side of this person, this person, and this person. And my dad always says that to me. I think it's hilarious because it really makes sense. And so my dad likes to play a lot of devil's advocate. So, for example, he's the guy that everybody hates at the party because he always talks about controversial things, right? So whether it's about religion, politics, or whose style is the best in the family, obviously me. We always have controversial talks like that, and he always takes the opposing side. And whenever I talk to him and I say, hey, Dad, this is my side of the story, he just laughs right at me. He says, hey, you need to see everybody's side of the story. But there's one example I'm thinking of just off the top of my head. Speeding. Whoa, fun one. So a couple of you guys may know, a couple of you guys may not know. Back in August, I got a super speeding ticket. Not the best thing in the world. I was going 86 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone. So quick math, that's 31 miles per hour of the speed limit. So if anybody's ever gotten a speeding ticket, which I hope is not a lot of you, especially people who just got their licenses, it's not the best thing in the world to drive home to your parents. So I drove home to my parents and I sat in my car and I was shaking and I was thinking, not because of a speeding ticket, because I was going to get yelled at. So I sat there shaking in my car and I came inside and first I got yelled at by my mom and then I got yelled at by my dad. And while my dad was yelling at me, I thought rather inconveniently, geez, isn't he a little bit of a hypocrite? I believe that way back in New Hampshire when we used to live there when I was just a little baby, my dad was in the newspaper. And he wasn't in the newspaper for being a great doctor or anything. He was in the newspaper for going, you guessed it, 31 miles per hour over the speed limit in a road in New Hampshire. And I thought it was hilarious because I I thought, you know, you were explaining your side of the story rather clearly to that police officer, but you're not letting me explain my side. So I always think it's hilarious because he's also a little bit of a hypocrite there. The fourth lesson that my dad has taught me is that every single story needs a little bit of masala. Now, you guys saw this already previously, right? My dad told me that he used to fight lions to go to school, that he used to walk through the tundra. He lived in India. There's no tundra in India. I don't know why I believed him. But as you can see, those are very basic examples of him doing this. But the biggest example of my dad having a masala-filled story is the fact that he is fully convinced we are at least 30% German. Now you guys may be wondering, Anvisha, look at you. And I'm thinking, yes guys, I know I'm not German, but you should tell my dad. So my dad and my sister took a 23andMe test a couple years back for Christmas. I don't know why. It wasn't gonna prove anything else, as you guys can clearly see. My dad here is 100% Central and South Asian. It says it very clearly, and I'll blow it up just for you. Look at that. 100% Deepak Das, Central and South Asian. And so my dad says, don't pay attention to that. Look at my ancestors. And I said, what ancestors of yours? So we go to the DNA ancestor site, and my dad says, look, this is my real cousin. I said, wow, that's cool. And he goes, but look right below. Scott, Billy, Diana. That means I'm German. At this point in time, I'm not even asking him why he chose German. I'm just wondering why we're European in general. As it says here, 0.23% DNA shared. Distant cousin. Apparently that means nothing to my dad. But I always think it's so funny because he tells every single person he can that he has the German jawline, that you can clearly see from his awesome physique that he is definitely German. Probably a close twin of the Chris Hemsworth brothers. And so it makes sense. But the biggest story that my dad, and the biggest lesson my dad has ever taught me is that family means everything. My dad has always said to me, you know, always be unapologetically who you are. Always be okay with being passionate about things, and always make sure that no matter where you are, you know you have family with you. And he is correct. I always have my family beside me. He always says it doesn't matter if you're at home or if you're abroad. It's the people that you choose to surround yourself with that will be your family. And so, all jokes aside, that's probably the biggest lesson my dad has ever taught me. And so, even though we may not have our dinner side table conversations anymore, and I might be going to college soon, I know that I will take my lessons wherever I go. Whether that be UGA, whether that be Georgia Tech, whether that be Vanderbilt, wherever I end up, no matter how far away I am. All I know is that maybe one day I'll even tell my kids my story. Maybe I'll say that I had to walk 10 miles to go to school every single day. That I grew up in a slum in the middle of nowhere, America. And that I had to come to my school where nobody cared about me, and I picked myself up from my bootstraps and I took myself all the way to Harvard. And that's what I'll tell my kids. But all in all, it doesn't matter what the lessons are, it matters who the lessons are from. So I would like to thank my immigrant father for the lessons he's taught me. Thank you.
I'm Bailey McCurdy, and I just played Linus and Lucy from Charlie Brown. For many of us, this song is nostalgic. It brings back memories of our childhood, and it makes us smile. Well, why? Because in the most basic sense, music has power. In fact, music has been proven to have immense impacts on the human brain, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. The brain is a complex organ. It's divided into the left and the right hemispheres, and it's further specialized into lobes, cortices, nerves, and glands. And music has a profound impact on almost all of these areas. Most broadly, music affects both hemispheres of our brain. So in a recent study at UC Berkeley, researchers used electrodes to map the brain signals of patients while they listened to a Pink Floyd song. They found equal amounts of activity in the left and the right hemispheres. In fact, they found so much activity that they were able to use these signals to recreate the song. So the left hemisphere is typically linked to language and speech processing, while the right handles emotions and images. So when we listen to music, the left hemisphere processes the lyrics, the intensity, the parts of the music that are similar to speech, while the right handles our own emotional responses to the music. So music affects both hemispheres. What else does it do? It's an auditory stimulus. It's first received by our ears. So logically, it activates the auditory cortex of our brains. But what you might not expect is that music affects areas of our brains associated with movement as well. Another University of California study showed the widespread activation of motor networks in response to music listening, which makes sense when we consider that music is made by playing instruments and is typically accompanied by dance. So a lot of this connection is facilitated by what we call mirror neurons. They're responsible for imitation. They mean that the brains of listeners sort of feel like they're the ones performing when they listen to music. And the same motor networks that would be activated in a performer are actually activated in the brains of the listeners as well. So you might see me playing the piano, and your motor cortex is activated as well. So, as well as movement, music has profound effects on our well-being. In 2001, researchers ran a study on what happens in our brain when music gives us chills. And they found increased activity in brain regions associated with reward, motivation, and emotion. So music that gives us chills causes a dopamine release. It's a neurotransmitter that affects our memory, our motion, our motivation, and many other beneficial brain and body functions. Music also activates the limbic system, which is responsible for initiating emotional responses to memory, to music, and also cementing these responses to memory. And so that's why music makes us feel nostalgic, because activation of these areas allows us to remember how a song made us feel many years ago. So just by listening to music, we can activate areas across our brains. And what's more, in musicians, these effects are amplified significantly. Musicians' corpus callosum, which is responsible for connecting the hemispheres of the brain, is strengthened. The auditory and motor cortexes of the brain is better connected, and the motor system is more developed. So in particular, the development of the cerebellum, which is partially responsible for fine motor skills, is striking in musicians. And as a result, trials have shown that musicians can learn non-musical finger-tapping sequences more quickly than non-musicians can. Comparing the brain anatomy of musicians and non-musicians shows us that the hand area of the motor cortex is more developed in musicians. So we've all probably seen a video of a child prodigy playing the violin or the piano. It's amazing. How did they get so good? Well, along with innate talent, and I'd imagine a lot of practice, brain growth is at its peak in little kids. So kids learn an instrument as their brain is growing, and their brain can adapt to have this large motor cortex and developed corpus callosum, like I've talked about. That's why learning music at a young age can be so beneficial, both for musicianship and brain function. This is in moderation, of course, because burnout is real. So we've learned about music's effects in the brains of listeners and musicians, and in the same way it affects our whole brains, it has tremendous potential across all areas of human life. In education, music-infused curriculums have proven invaluable tools to improve school systems. At Bolton Elementary in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, they tested a pilot program, bringing in a woodwind quintet that used music to teach math, reading, and all the rest of their students' curriculums. So instead of teaching music as an elective, they taught through music. And after a year of lessons, the school was reclassified from at-risk to exemplary. Schools in Arizona, using similar programs, were able to be outscoring their peers on all areas of their standardized tests. So as well as in education, music has tremendous potential in medicine through the growing field of music therapy. By watching the way that pre- and nonverbal individuals respond to music through their posture, their heart rate, or their facial expression, we're able to communicate with them. This applies to patients in the NICU, patients with fighting cancer, ventilated patients, and people with autism spectrum disorder. Playing music during surgery has even been proven to reduce post-operative pain in kids getting their tonsils removed. So in conjunction with conventional therapy, music therapy has proven to be very powerful. Music's also proved powerful in US history. It was played during the March on Washington to encourage activists. During the Cold War, jazz clarinetist Benny Goodman performed for Nikita Khrushchev in Moscow to ease tensions between the country. American musicians recorded We Are the World and raised $60 million for famine relief in Africa. American hip-hop artist Tony Blackman traveled to Africa and hosted workshops to educate youth about the prevention of HIV/AIDS and domestic violence. Music has been a tool for diplomacy, outreach, and humanitarianism. Music is powerful. Its effects on our brains and our world are undeniable. So after all this talk about music, I couldn't leave you without a song. And I'll finish with one that's nostalgic here in Georgia.
Thank you all so much for coming out tonight, and especially thank you to the 11 of you, the 10 speakers, and Gia for everything that you have done. Thank you to Lee and Jackson for working our lights and our audio as well. It has been a year of firsts for ACAD Talks, which has been really incredible. It was our first year of props on stage, the balancing of a broom. The first year that several presenters actually used their capstone research and projects to guide their presentations. The first year of live music and a group ensemble at the end. This is also the first year in the 7 years of ACAD Talks that we have had a 4-year presenter. So congratulations to Anfeisha. This is her 4th ACAD Talk. She's given one every year in high school, and if you have been here for each of those years, you know that her dad has pretty much made an appearance in all of those talks. So Dr. Dawes, also, thank you so much for being a good sport all 4 years. This year there were some really incredible kind of connecting themes, some unexpected connections. When I first heard Bailey's talk, I was kind of blown away with it in and of itself, but it became even more powerful when the next night I heard Andrew literally talking about the power of music in his own life. And certainly there were connecting themes of lessons everywhere. Lessons of approaching your work as service, lessons from COVID-19, lessons from traveling or waiting, and lots of lessons from dads. So thank you to all the dads out there. The lessons we can learn from our own bodies, the lessons we can learn from what might look like a pollutant, but is actually helping our oceans. And I have learned a lot from each of you over the last several weeks as well. I always enjoy these weeks of ACAD Talks, and I just appreciate you all dedicating your time to this and spending your time with me. So thank you all for coming. As you go home, please drive safely. Turn on some music, maybe some Prince. Definitely don't speed and don't drift around the corners. Thank you.
Before we go, we wanted to say thank you to Ms. Towery for all the work she's been doing. She has worked really hard the last couple of weeks, and especially thank you for 4 years of hearing me talk about whatever. And so I really appreciate it. I think we all really appreciate all the work that you've done. So give her a round of applause, please.